The woman had just stepped out of the shower when, "Hey there, Mrs. Danvers." Before she could react, a thug grabbed her, knocked her out in a single move.
I'm pregnant.
By the time Detective Mason Danvers got home, his wife had already taken her last breath. Victor stood there with a wicked grin, fueling Mason's rage. But even in his anger, he couldn't pull the trigger. All he could do was drop to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he held his wife's lifeless body. 3 years ago, Mason was the one who put Victor behind bars, but no one knew that the first thing Victor would do when he got out was kill Mason's wife for revenge. Mason's dream, his mission to clean up the streets, none of it mattered anymore. Now there was only one thing left: revenge. That night, he grabbed his guns, jumped in his car, and headed straight for one of Victor's hideouts. He sent one last message to his cop buddies, dropping his location. "You know why I'm here, right? Yeah. 'Cause you ain't got no home to go back to." Minutes later, the place was drenched in blood. Everyone inside, dead. When the cops arrived, Mason was already on his knees, his weapons tossed to the floor. They arrested him for first-degree murder. But that was the plan all along, because now he was exactly where he needed to be, inside the same prison as Victor. The moment he stepped into the prison, he was called into the warden's office. The warden didn't sugarcoat it. Out there, people might see you as a hero, but in here, you're just another dead man walking.
Stonewall can be a very challenging place.
Still, he assigned Mason a simple job, working in the laundry room.
I've arranged for you to work in the laundry.
But Mason didn't care about deals. He was here for one thing only. Meanwhile, Victor got the news. Did he look worried? Not one bit. He just chuckled. "This is my house. Let's see how long he lasts." The next day, while Mason was washing clothes, a few inmates jumped him. He fought back, landed a few hits, but there were too many. They took him down. A guard showed up just in time, stopping the fight. But Mason got the message loud and clear. This prison wasn't gonna be easy. A few days later, he had a chat with a prison guard and found out the truth. Victor wasn't just another inmate. He ran things here. Smuggling, bribes, connections inside and outside. Victor controlled it all, but Mason didn't care. He wasn't here to play the game. He was here to end it. That night, he pulled a pen from under his mattress and sharpened the tip. Then, when the time was right, he cornered one of the inmates who had jumped him in the laundry room. They fought. Mason had the guy pinned, pen pressed against his throat. A second later, the guy was choking on his own blood, dead. Mason didn't stop there. He found his next target, a guy sweeping the prison corridors. Without warning, Mason struck. "Let's see where the rest of your boys are." Seconds later, another body hit the ground. When Victor found out his guys were being taken out one by one, he sent his best men after Mason. But Mason? He was a wolf on a rampage. He fought like a madman until a guard stepped in and slammed him to the ground. Once again, he was dragged to the warden's office. This time, the warden had an offer. "Work for me. Take out the guys I don't like, and I'll make your stay a whole lot easier." Mason instantly knew Victor had power because of this guy, but a cop is always a cop. Mason just smirked and said, "Not interested." The warden wasn't amused. He threw Mason into solitary confinement. Days later, when Mason was finally back in general population, he stole a piece of metal from the heating pipe in the laundry room, and that night, Mason secretly hid a piece of metal in his clothes. Then, he shaped it into a brass knuckle. Now, he was taking out Victor's men one by one. Shh! "Stay quiet," he whispered, silencing another one. When Victor found out his guys were still getting killed, he snapped, "That's it, no more." The next time Mason went to grab his food, Victor saw his chance. He slipped a sharp knife from his pocket and crept toward Mason. But Mason wasn't stupid. He could feel it coming. At the last second, he turned and punched a guard square in the face. Chaos erupted. The guard tackled him to the ground, and in the middle of the commotion, Mason dodged Victor's attack. But there was a price to pay. He was thrown back into solitary confinement. And when he got out, he had only one thing left to do. End Victor. One last enemy left. Victor. Mason had only gotten stronger. The more men they threw at him, the harder he fought. Knives, weapons, nothing could stop him. And finally, with one swift move, he used a rope to throw the last thug off the roof. Meanwhile, the entire prison had erupted into a full-scale riot. Guards were down, and prisoners had taken their weapons. The place had turned into a war zone. Victor grabbed a gun from one of his guys and started firing at Mason, but every single shot missed, hitting other prisoners instead. Mason was finally face to face with Victor. This wasn't gonna be a gunfight. This was personal. Victor smirked. You wanna know how your wife felt that night? Let me show you. Mason threw punch after punch, but Victor was built like a damn tank. His hits barely made a dent, but when Victor hit back, Mason felt every ounce of that power. He could barely stay on his feet. Then Mason saw an opening. One clean strike. Victor hit the ground. Hard. Mason was finally about to end it, but then the warden stepped in. The warden wasn't gonna let Mason take control of the prison, but killing an ex-cop himself, that would be too messy. So instead, he handed the gun to Victor. Finish him. Mason, barely standing, looked straight at Victor, and then he dropped the bombshell. You really think he's on your side? He's the one who gave up your men's locations. Victor froze. Then he snapped. With one brutal kick, he shattered the warden's leg, and just like that, the two turned on each other. Victor still had the upper hand. Mason was done. He had nothing left. Victor smirked. Say hi to your wife and kid for me. Big mistake, because that was the moment Mason was waiting for. With one last burst of strength, he reached for his hidden weapon and ended it. One final blow, one last breath. It was over. His wife, their unborn child, they were finally avenged. Do you love your family?